These are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. As we continue to mark the decade since the September 11th attacks in the United States, today we spend the hour with MIT professor, world-renowned political dissident, linguist, and author Noam Chomsky. In the months after 9/11, as the Bush administration attacked Afghanistan and geared up for the invasion of Iraq, Noam Chomsky released a small book that provided the definitive counter-narrative to the jingoism of the time. The book was called simply 9/11, a collected series of interviews Chomsky had given on the roots of the 9/11 attacks and his prescription for a just response. At a time when lawmakers from both sides of the aisle joined together to authorize endless war, Chomsky's was the leading voice to call for a look in the mirror, for a rethinking of U.S. actions in the Middle East and across the globe. 9/11 went on to become a surprise bestseller. 10 years later, Professor Chomsky has just released an updated version. It's called 9/11, Was There an Alternative? Was There an Alternative refers to the U.S. assassination of Osama bin Laden and the continuity Chomsky sees between the Bush administration's foreign policy and President Obama's. Today, we'll speak with Noam Chomsky about the decade since 9/11, at a time when the U.S. is at war in several areas, at home in continued economic turmoil. Noam Chomsky's just returned from Iceland and Norway. He's joining us from Boston, Massachusetts. And I'm joined here in New York for this interview by Democracy Now! Producer Aaron Mate, who covered the thwarted Gaza-bound aid flotilla in Greece. Welcome, Aaron, joining me in this interview. It's good to have you with us.
Thanks, Amy.
And thanks so much, Noam Chomsky, for being with us so soon after you've come back from your trip. Noam, why don't we begin with this new book? You wrote 9/11 10 years ago, what became the definitive counter-narrative at the time. What did you feel was important to understand then, and now with Was There an Alternative?
Well, as you mentioned, it wasn't really a book. It was a collection of interviews, the ones that we were able to get transcripts for. Some of them we couldn't. There were a number of things that I thought had to be pointed out. By now, I think they're hardly even controversial. But one was that the claim that the U.S. was being attacked because, as the president put it, they hate our freedoms, was completely untenable. They hated our policy. In fact, it would be more accurate to say we hate their freedoms. There's plenty of documentation about that, going back to the 1950s. Shortly after the president's speech, the Pentagon had a study of this, and they concluded, yes, it's not that they hate our freedoms, it's they hate our policies. And as I say, evidence about that is enormous back to the 50s. So, for example, in 1958, President Eisenhower, in internal documents long since released, raised the question with his staff about why there's a campaign of hatred against us in the Arab world. He said, not from the governments, but from the people. And the National Security Council, major planning body, had just released a study on this in which they said that they concluded that there's a perception in the Arab world that the United States supports harsh, oppressive dictatorships, and that the U.S. blocks democracy and development, and that we do it because we want to keep control over their energy resources. And it went on to say that this is fairly accurate, and that's pretty much what we should be doing, as long as the populations are kept quiet. And so it goes on. I won't run through the details, but so it goes on until the present. In fact, right at this moment, Obama has succeeded in descending even below George W. Bush in approval in the Arab world. It's minuscule, few percent. And it's the policies, same policy. The policies change, but they're hostile. So one thing is we should understand where atrocities come from. They don't come from nowhere. And if we're serious, we should try to do something about what is the basis for them. That's been the other issue, which was important, and I think we have a lot more evidence about it now, is that there probably were much more constructive alternatives. The attack on the 9/11 attack was pretty harshly criticized throughout the Muslim world, but particularly in the jihadi movement. Fatwas from leading clerics, harsh condemnation. It's very likely that it would have been possible then to split the jihadi movement, to isolate Al-Qaeda, to move to apprehend the suspects, and of course, in our system of justice, theoretically, people are suspects until they're sentenced. So to apprehend the suspects, treat it as a criminal action, try to make use of the fact that there was tremendous antagonism to this, even among the jihadi movement, and move on to a much more constructive relationship with the general Muslim Arab world. Well, that path wasn't taken. The path that was taken was to lash out violently, first in Afghanistan, then in Iraq. That simply was kind of following Osama bin Laden's playbook. Actually, that was pointed out pretty quickly by people like Michael Scheuer. He didn't identify himself then, has since, the CIA, head of the CIA task force that was tracking bin Laden. He ended up concluding the United States is bin Laden's best ally. We're helping. His goal was to mobilize the Muslim world around the fear that the United States was attacking Islam, was carrying out a crusade. They have to defend themselves, and we helped. The invasion of Iraq particularly gave a big shot in the arm to the jihadi extremists. It was predicted by U.S. and British intelligence agencies, that's been released since, that the attack on Iraq would increase terror, and it did, by a factor of 7 the first year, according to Rand Corporation quasi-governmental statistics. Well, that's what happens when you lash out violently without seeking to understand the nature of what's happening and pursuing the options for diplomatic, peaceful, negotiated settlements, and treating crimes as crimes. When there's a crime, you try to identify the likely perpetrators, apprehend them, bring them to a fair trial. I mean, it's very likely that could have been done at the time. We don't know. There were tentative offers from the Taliban to allow a trial of bin Laden. It was not pursued. It was the U.S. just dismissed it. We don't talk to you. Well, could that have succeeded? We can only speculate. It surely could have been done on May 2nd when U.S. commandos, Navy SEALs, apprehended bin Laden, defenseless, was with his wife, no arms, apprehended him and assassinated him, then dumped his body at sea. Now, that's kind of an action which is just bound to increase speculation, cynicism, doubt, quite different from what in fact should have been done. Actually, one of the leading British legal specialists, civil libertarian, who incidentally approved of the action, nevertheless pointed out that that the way it was carried out was criminal and dangerous in its implications. He compared it to the treatment of the far more horrendous war criminals after the Second World War. He pointed out that the British government wanted to just kill the Nazi leaders, but the U.S. government, or Truman, insisted that they be tried. They followed, and in fact, then came the Nuremberg trials, which had their flaws, but at least did bring out in public the nature of the crimes. They also led to quite an important conclusion by the chief prosecutor, U.S. chief prosecutor, Justice Robert Jackson. He informed the tribunal in rather eloquent words that as he put it, we are handing these defendants a poisoned chalice. And if we ever sip from it, if we ever commit such crimes as aggression, one of the major crimes, then we must suffer the same punishment, or else essentially the trial's a farce. And that's a choice we've had to make since, not the right answer in my opinion.